fun activities. My name is Natalie, and I work for Phoenix Counseling. I've worked here almost 9 years, um, and I am clean and sober. And I got sober when I was 22 years old in 1999. So I thought that I would share kind of a recap on, what led me to get clean so you guys know that I know what I'm talking about. Um, because, being clean 18 years is a long way from where you all are right now. But I was once in your chair. I was once in your shoes. I once had one day. I once had 3, 5, 7, 10 days. I once was counting days. I used to have really bad cravings. I've been through the struggles of being an addict and having the disease of addiction almost kill me, and getting clean and sober and having to pull myself out of the hell of addiction. So, so I'm no different from you. I just have made the choice one day at a time, and sometimes doing everything but pick up again. My life may have looked crazy. I may have made really bad decisions, but I didn't pick up. So it's been 18 years since I have gotten clean. Um,
Go, Natalie.
I'm sorry?
I said, go, Natalie. 18 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so as far as like the using goes, it just, I was the type of addict that was totally unmanageable. I was totally powerless from the minute I picked up as a teenager. I just fell in love with alcohol and drugs, and I just was like, this is what I want to do. This is the only way that I can have fun. Um, I love the way it makes me feel. I loved everything about it. And so instead of being like, quote, normal people who would say just do it every so often, I wanted to do it every day. I wanted to do it every waking moment. And so that's one of the differences between, me as an addict and somebody that's just a social drinker or user. Um, and so this craving, this disease, the destruction of it just took over, and it controlled me and it ruled me. And I lost the power of choice. And I really think I lost that power from the minute I picked up because of my propensity for being an addict. And, it ended up making all my decisions for me. The decision for me to use, um, it just, it was my God. It became my everything, and it became my sole reason for existence. And I was not one of those addicts who had, I was doing it for fun, but it was not fun because I never had the right drugs. I never had enough. I never had enough money. I couldn't trust anyone. So it was all about just being shitted on by other people, being really frustrated, not being able to get what I wanted or needed, doing really stupid things when I was drunk or high, um, and just being a mess. I was just a mess. And I got arrested. I got kicked out of school. I got expelled. So this was my life, as an addict. Um, and to make a long story short, what happened is whenever I was 22 years old, I got arrested for stealing a bottle of pills from a pharmacy that I was working at. I stole an entire bottle of pills because my plan is to take the pills and sell them and leave the town that I was living in because I was miserable there and I hated it and I wanted to escape. And I had no money. I was working at a pharmacy for, $7 an hour like 20 years ago, so it wasn't very much money. So I saw this opportunity one day at the pharmacy. I was taking a bunch of pills whenever I could, like I would just steal them one by one, but this one day there was an opportunity to steal an entire bottle, and so I took it. And I ended up going to jail, and my parents actually told on me. My mom found the pills in my room. I was living at home at the time, and she called my dad, and my dad said, if you don't call if you don't call the pharmacy, if you don't call the police and tell on her what you did, what I did, then my dad was going to call the police. So my mom was like, no, I'm not turning my daughter in to the police for this. And so my dad did. My dad called somebody. I think he called the pharmacy, and they came in and they had this big audit of all of the pills, and I was freaking out because I was like, this is really unusual, and what the fuck is going on? And my coworker who had worked there a long time, she's like, they never do this. And there was all these, officials coming and counting. And finally, at the end of the week, they called me into the office when I came into work, and into this back office. And they said, we know what you've done. We know you've taken pills. And I denied it and said, no, I haven't. And they said, you need to sign this paper, and this paper basically says you're guilty and you give up all your rights. And I'm like, I'm not signing any papers. I'm not doing anything. And they got really pissed, and they brought in a federal officer. And this federal officer was this woman who was so kind and loving and compassionate. And she, instead of using like this force of, you're in trouble and big trouble, she was like, she said, I know you're hurting. I know you're in pain. I want to help you. And so she got me to confess, and I wrote down everything I could ever remember taking. And she said I would be arrested, but I wouldn't have to go to jail for a couple days. She let me go back to my parents' custody, and then I voluntarily went into jail that following Monday, and I was in there 11 days because my bond was too high for me to get out. So it was like $30,000, and I didn't have 10% of that. I barely had $30, so I had to sit in jail with these federal charges looming over my head. And I got a public defender who told me, you have to go to meetings, you have to stay clean, you're going to be, in between, you're not going to go to court for a year. So if you get in trouble between now and court, then you're going to go to prison. And you may go to federal prison with these drug charges that you have. And so I was like, okay, I could respect that, I could be worked with. And so I got out of jail after 11 days, and I went to an NA meeting, and, not really wanting to be there. And I was like, nobody really talked to me, and I felt really entitled, like, why aren't you talking to me? Do you know who I am? And so I just kind of was turned off by that. And then I went to an AA meeting a couple of days later, and there was something that happened to me in that meeting, and this was, my sobriety date, February 1st, 1999, where I was in this meeting, and there was an old man speaking. He was telling a story, kind of like I'm telling now, and it wasn't anything that he said. It was just the fact that there was something inside of my heart that had shifted. There was something in me that had this tiny bit of willingness to want a better life. Because whenever I thought about myself in my life, I hated myself. I hated myself. I hated my life. I hated my past. I wanted to not be alive anymore. And I did not want to be Natalie Speakman. I just, I felt like just the worst piece of shit on this earth that was just worthless, undeserving, and just this self-loathing and self-hatred, guilt and shame that I had just was like a cancer inside of me. It just tore at my soul. And I just felt like I had a black heart. I felt like I had a black soul and that I just was unworthy of anything good in my life. And but there was something in this meeting, some little spark, and you can call that higher power or whatever you want, but it was some kind of a shift of willingness that I had. And at the end of the meeting, they offered chips, and they offered a white chip. And if you stand up and go to the front of the room and pick up the white chip, that's a sign of surrender, that you are willing to not try and drink one day at a time. And I got up, I walked to the front of the room and picked up this chip without, like, it was like something was propelling me up there. It wasn't like, I'm going to pick up this thing and I'm going to stop drinking today. It was like something greater than myself just, pushed me forward in a way. And I picked up a white chip, and I have not had any chemicals or alcohol since. But the road from there to here today is, life happens. Just because I decided to get clean and sober did not mean that life would cease happening. It was fucking hard. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I was drinking a lot every day. So for me, alcohol was a big craving that I had. And my body physically craved alcohol, and I didn't know what to do because I always, if I craved alcohol, I would drink. And so, I went to meetings that first week sober. I went every single day, and I just kind of was floundering. I knew that I didn't know if I wanted to commit to a life of being clean, but I knew that I did not want to be and keep doing what I was doing. That wasn't working. I knew that I would die soon. I knew that I couldn't go much further. I knew I couldn't go on much longer the way that I was living. And so there was something in me, and like what I like to say, it was like 51% of me wanted to stay clean, even though 49% of me wanted to get high. Like that one little percentage more that wanted something different for myself in my life was enough to keep me from picking up, and a lot of times I would just have to go 1 minute at a time. Can I make it to noon? Okay, I made it till noon. Now let's see, can I make it till, the meeting at 5 or 8 or whatever? And just having in my early days of sobriety, this physical craving just weighing me down. But I jumped into AA right away, and because I just had nothing else, I just jumped in. And these people, they knew how I felt, they knew how I thought, they had come out the other side. And one of my favorite stories that I tell is about how I got sober on a Monday, and it was Friday. So it was like my first weekend to not drink. And I'm 22 years old, so the whole thing about partying and I'm so young and all of that was in my mind. And I had this craving, like I said, and I went to a meeting Friday night, and just really craving wanting to drink. And I went to the meeting, and it didn't make me feel better. I still wanted to drink after the meeting, and I was like, shit, this sucks. Like, now what do I do? Like, the meeting didn't work. I still feel like I want to drink, and this craving was just gnawing at me, and I didn't know what to do. And I just imagined myself like going to a gas station and getting some beer. And so I went to a gas station by my house, and I sat in the parking lot, and I remember sitting there, and I remember vividly imagining these two paths in front of me, and one of the paths led into the gas station. That path led me to go in there, to buy the beer, to come out, to get in my car and to drink it, and then to whatever, satisfy that craving. So I knew what that road looked like. I knew, and I had enough awareness that I knew I couldn't just have the one. I knew that if I had the one, I would have the whole life back, because I knew that I couldn't just take one beer one time. If I knew that if I took one sip of one drink, that it would be the whole shebang. Everything I hated about that way of life, everything about the using and the drinking and the powerlessness and the unmanageability would be right there again. It was like this, it was a big life decision, because it's like, do you want the old life? If you go in and drink the beer and do what you always did, then you're going to get the old life, and you can't pick and choose what that life is. It's either all or nothing. It's not like, oh, okay, because I quit for a couple days, now I can pick the good parts and I can control and manage how my life is going to be. Because being an addict, I don't have that choice. And so whenever I make a decision to pick up, I get everything with it, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I had worked hard for 5 days. Like, it was fucking white knuckling, like, to not drink and drug for 5 whole days was really hard. And I had made it 5 days, and if I were to take a drink, then bam, it's all gone. And so imagine that scenario of Natalie going in and doing that and drinking, and then, doing what she always did, letting herself down in the guilt and the shame. And then I thought, okay, what if I don't? What if I don't pick up? Like, I had never done that in my life. Every time in my life up until that point, if I felt an urge to get high, I would do it, because I was just ruled by it. So I never tried to not. It's like, oh, okay, I want to drink right now, and if I had the money and the resources, of course. So it's like, okay, well, I want to do it, then I'm just going to do it. So this was the first time where I was like, I'm going to try and not do it. I'm going to try and not pick up, even though everything in my body wants to. I'm going to try not to, because I don't know what happens when I don't pick up. I know the road that happens when I pick up. And I was at a place of desperation where I wanted something different, and I had some willingness, and I had some open-mindedness. And I'd hit a bottom. I couldn't go on the way I was going. And so I imagined it was like this big question mark, like the other path, the path that led to not picking up. It was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what that path looks like, but I don't want to give in to the same old thing again. And in that moment, maybe it was grace, maybe it was higher power, whatever, maybe it was my own empowerment, my own decision, but I was like, I'm gonna see what happens if I try and not drink. I'm just gonna see if I can do it. And so the path of not drinking led me to go pick up a phone. And there was a payphone there, and I had gotten a woman's number from the AA list. And I had this list of numbers, and I was like, okay, in AA they say if you need help, to call somebody. And so I went to the payphone and I called this woman on this phone list. And she didn't answer the phone. Her answering machine picked up. I don't even remember if I left a message. But when I hung up that phone from making that different decision, I had the strength to not go into the gas station, and I had the strength to get in my car and drive home and I stayed sober another day. And I really know with all of my heart, if I would have made a decision to go pick up that day, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I just wouldn't. My life has been, it's dictated from these different points, like these different turning points, and that was a turning point for me. And then the next day when I woke up, day 6 of sobriety, I was like, I felt good. I was proud. I was really, I was like, wow, I could have gotten drunk last night, and I almost did, but I didn't. I didn't do it, and I was able to make it through that moment of extreme craving and almost relapsing without picking up. And I just felt so proud of myself. It was like I made a right decision for myself, and it felt good. And I was so used to making decisions that just made me feel bad and that just disrespected myself and just confirmed this self-hatred and added more to the pile. And now I had something to be proud of, that I had chosen the right thing for like one of the first times in my life. And so then that day it was so much easier to stay sober because I had this momentum of like this decision that I had made and this pride that I felt. And I went to a meeting that day and I didn't drink that day. And I just, the craving, I craved alcohol physically for 30 days of my sobriety before that went away. So I still had to deal with these cravings, but I didn't ever have a crisis point like that one I just described. I was able to manage and deal with it, and I did. And I had crazy dreams every night. I just, my body and mind were going through a lot. It was, my body's finally like, wow, great, I can finally try and work like I'm supposed to, because I wasn't constantly putting chemicals in that were destroying my body. And so it was this really strange time of detoxing, of craving, of white knuckling, and just taking everything one day at a time and one step at a time. And I went to meetings about every single day. That's what worked for me. I got a sponsor in AA. I still went to some NA as well, but just my path was that AA was more my primary program, even though I was both, an alcoholic and a drug addict. And the early times in my sobriety were about, like, I was a toddler learning to walk. I had never showed up in the world without being under the influence of something. When I was using, the minute I woke up, I used. I never was, if I was like not under the influence, if I was just, dry and not high or drunk, like I hated the way it felt. I hated being in my body. I felt like my skin, I didn't feel comfortable in my skin. And I hated the feeling of being sober whenever I was, using and I couldn't get what I needed. And so it was just this new process of like, what is life like without being constantly high? I didn't know because I had never done it, since I started using whenever I was younger. And so it was roller coaster of just, highs and lows and my body going through all of this physical stuff, crazy ass dreams, and just really emotional things that I would go through. When I had 10 days sober, I had another experience. And I'm sharing this because it illustrates the point that it doesn't matter what's going on in my outside life. If I want to be clean, then I don't have to pick up no matter what happens, no matter what circumstances are going on, no matter what's going on around me. There's no excuse. If I want to be clean, there's nothing that can keep me from that. If I want to get high, there's nothing that can keep me from that either. I mean, I'm sure you all know people who've had tons of consequences in their life, and I mean, maybe they even die because of using, so there's nothing on either side that can, like, well, if this happens, I'll definitely quit, because everybody's different. We all have our own levels of bottom. I'm sure, if you guys know each other's story in the room, you understand that. Some people can be more of a high bottom and they quit, without losing a lot. Some people lose everything and almost their lives before they give up, and then some don't even stop then. So, but this thing that happened when I had 10 days, I had met a girl when I was in jail, and I'd been praying in jail, and I'd been a little, I didn't want to get clean or anything, but I just, I had a little bit of an awakening whenever I was in there, and I met this girl in there, and she was like kind of on board, and we'd talk about the Bible or something. I don't remember what, but it was some kind of like spiritual talk that we had. And so I kind of felt like this girl, may be somebody good to hang out with. And she had a lot of drug charges and armed robbery and things like that. And she got out of jail. She wasn't expecting to for a long time, but she got out and she called me and she's like, I'm out. And I said, oh, okay. She's like, let's hang out. I'm like, okay, great. Maybe we can go to a meeting or something, or go to the mall, or do something that, people that don't use do. And so I went and picked her up, and her mom was like, make sure you bring her back here when you're finished. Like, you have to agree with me that you're going to bring her back home. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I'm going to bring her back home. It didn't make sense to me. Well, what ended up happening was we go out and she's like, hey, can we stop by this person's house really quick? And we go over there and she comes out and she had money. And then she's like, oh, I've got to go over here. Can you just take me over just a couple streets down over to this person's house? And I'm just kind of like, okay, like not understanding what's happening. But I go and wait for her, and she comes out a little while later with more money. And then she's saying that she wants to go get high. And I'm like, oh, what, what the hell is this? Like, what have I gotten myself into? I give myself a break because I was young. I mean, I was young. I just, whatever. I got myself into this situation. But I ended up driving this girl around while she prostituted herself, and then she was buying drugs and using. And I just was so like shell shocked. I didn't know what to do. And we were in a city that it wasn't my town. It was a nearby town, and I didn't really know even where I was. And and then she would offer like, hey, do you want to smoke some? And I was like, no, no, like I'd done that before, but it wasn't my drug of choice. So I just didn't want to do it. And I was sober 10 days, I mean, I'm like this, I'm wanting to be clean and sober. And, finally, after 3 or 4 hours of this, I'm just a wreck. I'm just in this anxiety, and my body is just, on fire with anxiety. And I'm like, let's get some pot, like that was my answer. Like, I don't want what you're doing, but I just got caught up in this situation. And we went to try and find some, and we couldn't find any. And finally, I mean, I wasn't even really wanting to do it, but I just was caught in this situation, and just it was really crazy. And so I ended up taking. I took her. I didn't take her back home. She said, "Don't take me home," and I just was like, "I want to get the hell out of here." And I dropped her off at a strip club. That's where she wanted to be dropped off. And I've never seen or heard or know even what happened to that girl after that day. But I was just a mess when I left her. And I went straight to a meeting. And I remember walking down the stairs and my knees were just shaking. And I go to the meeting and I'm trying to, calm myself. And I call my sponsor. I go meet with my sponsor and I tell her what happened. And I tell her honestly, and she doesn't believe me. She's like, you didn't, get high? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And she was like, okay, are you sure? Like, I mean, I understand why she wouldn't have believed me, because I only had 10 days, but I didn't. I was sober. And, it was just a situation that showed that sometimes things happen, but you've got to be like, careful about the things you get yourself into, especially newly in recovery. I'm really lucky that I got out of there with my sobriety and with my life. I mean, it was dangerous what was going on. But, after a couple days, I righted myself again. I felt normal again. And again, it was just another situation that was like I made it through that sober. And each situation that I made it through helped me more and more have initiative and have, drive and will and hope to continue to keep going. Um, and then after about a month or so, I was really craving. I wanted to get high. Like I didn't want to drink anymore. The cravings had gone, but then this craving of like wanting to use really was coming to me like physically and mentally. And one day I called my sponsor, and because I learned that being honest is the most important thing. I'm an addict. I'm going to think about using. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think about it. I've thought about it in the past few years. I mean, it's just something that's in my mind as a way to deal with things because that's who I was. And, so like having thoughts, there's nothing to be ashamed of if you want to have, if you have thoughts to get high. The danger point is when you don't say anything about it. That's when it's a problem. Keeping it inside and keeping it a secret is what makes it grow, and what makes it, then it turns into this big thing, and then it's much easier to just give in and go do it. Whenever I tell on myself, it breaks that spell that those thoughts have on me. And I think there's a propensity for people to just not want to share it because they think there's something wrong. Like, if I want to use, there's something wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong if you want to. Like, coming off of years of addiction, of course you're going to want to. Like, that's the way our bodies are wired for that, and our minds are wired for that. So luckily, I had this another turning point where I just one day, it was just this one day in particular, I just really wanted to get high. And instead of keeping it inside, I called my sponsor and I said, I just have to tell you, like, I don't want to go to the meeting today and I really just want to get high. And she was like, okay, I can appreciate that. And I'm glad you're saying something. And can you just not do it before, like, just make it to the meeting without getting high? Can you agree to do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. Like it was maybe 4 hours or something. Like, yeah, I can make it to the meeting and not use in between. And she's like, and call, if you want to again, like call me, but if not, I'll see you at the meeting. And, I show up at the meeting, I made it through those 4 hours. And then, of course, being in the meeting and being around all the people in AA just gave me the strength, and that craving, that thought disappeared. And again, it was another victory for me in early sobriety of I made it through that. I made it through this craving, and I didn't do it. And I told on it. Telling on the disease it's still, that's the thing that saves my ass. I mean, I've wanted to drink in later sobriety. Even a year or two ago, I really wanted to drink, and it's like, oh, you have this many years sober, you shouldn't be wanting to. No, that's not true. As an alcoholic, that's just how it is. And I talked about it and I shared about it, and then it loses its power. And so all of these struggles, all of these battles, like, is it worth it? Like, you sitting in your seats today, looking at your life, whatever stage of recovery or not recovery that you're in, you are in a place where it's time now, you have a chance. There's been this space open for you in your life where you can make a new choice. Are you happy with your life up until this point? Are you happy with your decisions? For me, I was suicidal. I was so miserable because there was something inside of me. There was something in my soul that was calling to me and telling me that, bye. There was something inside of me that was.
No, she can't leave. Gotta walk around. She has to leave early, but she was here last time.
Oh, okay. Bye. Good to see you. Happy Easter weekend.
Same to you.
Thank you. Okay, bye. Um, so, there's something in each of our souls and each of our hearts that's calling us to do something different, and the circumstances in your life have led you to where you're sitting right now. If you think about it, and I'm sure you all have known at least one person that's died from this disease, and if you think about those chairs that you're sitting in and the ghosts of the people that are in those chairs, the people that have never made it to where you're sitting, it's such a small percentage of people that actually get clean and sober and stay that way for any length of time. And you guys are chosen. Like I feel like I was chosen. I was given a gift, and that gift I could choose to do with whatever I wanted. But I had to have something to live for, I mean, I had to have hope. I had to have, I didn't, if my life was going to continue to be the shit life it was before I got clean, I didn't want it. So I had to create a new life for myself. And the way I created that, I created being a new person by the decisions I made every day. Those victories, those things I just shared with you, they were fucking hard. I mean, this shit isn't easy. But every day that I mucked through and I made myself take one more step, clean and sober, over and over again, my life improved. So it wasn't like I did all this work and I didn't feel better. I started to feel better, and it didn't take very long. Like, I don't know, where you guys are in your path, but life is forgiving and loving, and sobriety is accommodating, and recovery is accommodating. And I'm sure that if you've even got a couple days or whatever, like, you can still pick out some gift or something that's a little bit of a shift. If it's not huge, if there's something like, I woke up today and I didn't feel like hell, I didn't regret what I did yesterday. Like, that was a big one for me, because whenever I was using, every morning I would wake up and just be like, oh, what the fuck did I do last night? And just regret things, so every day I would be having these new regrets. And now I don't, even after 5 days sober, like, I didn't have a regret from the day before. And so creating a new life, one that, is worth living, a life that is worth being clean for. Whenever I first got clean and sober, I didn't know what that life looked like. I just was kind of floundering around, and that's okay, because I just didn't pick up no matter what. And so if you're in that space, then great. Like, just keep going one day at a time, and your higher power is going to step in. There are going to be things in your life that will come that will, be little breadcrumbs. Like, maybe it'll be one day you feel good for no reason. For me, to feel good for no reason was alien. It was like, it didn't make any sense, because I had to get high to feel good. But then, of course, it turned on me, and it made me feel worse than before. So to have any kind of a space in the day where I could feel good while I was not using was a victory. And so even just finding those small little treasured moments, if you can find them. And then I surrounded myself with sober people. Like, for me, that was vital, because if I don't have examples around me, if I'm just going back into the same old life, into the same old people, those people are the people from the life that I came from, and the old person. Like, I was changing and evolving into a different person. And so I had to surround myself with new people and new energy. And these people had their shit together, which was different, because I never did, And these people, they knew how to not drink, and they knew how, they had jobs, and they had families, they had cars, they had lives. And I wanted what they had. And because I knew they had been where I was, I knew that it was possible. And so I had to surround myself with people like that. And, they don't necessarily have to be in a 12-step program. That, for me, that's what it was. Other people, maybe church or some kind of sport activity. I mean, whatever it is. But having new energy in my life, because I cannot create a new life as the same person that I was before. And so that, if you want to think about yourself like, okay, you've got this, you're blessed right now with this space to create something new. Even if you don't feel like it's true because you're sitting here and you have a chance to create something different in your life and to, redeem yourself from choices and decisions you've made from the past. So, this is your turning point. So what are you going to do with this chance? Are you going to use it and milk it and get everything out of it that you can to create a new life? Or are you going to have it just be, a temporary reprieve from your old life and then go back to the old life, but it's going to be even worse than before? I can guarantee 100% that it will, because it never gets better. It only gets worse, the disease of addiction. And once you get knowledge, like you guys are getting knowledge, you're learning about yourselves and your lives and your motivations and the disease of addiction and all of that, like to go back to using after you get this information, it ruins it. I mean, it did for me. Like, I relapsed before I told you the whole getting sober story. Like, I was sober when I was 17 and I relapsed. And it just, you can't ever go back to not to being oblivious. Like, and this might not even be your first time around, maybe you've already done this, but it only gets worse and it only compounds itself. And these, all of the knowledge that you're getting, it's like in AA they say, having a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. It's the most miserable place to be, because you can't just be like, oh, I'm 16 and I'm getting drunk and I have no worries. Like that, like getting high and drunk like that is gone. I mean, it's gone for you guys. It was gone for me. And so are you going to create something new with your life and a life worth living? And for me, when I first got sober, I didn't have any big dreams and goals. I was living at home and I had no car and no money. So I had nothing. And my only goal was to have my own apartment and my own car. That was it. That was all I wanted. And that's okay. I was young and that was my ambitions at the time. And of course, to stay sober and clean. And I have some regrets in my sobriety, of course, because I'm human, but none like, the regrets from my using past. And one of the things I wish that somebody would have told me when I had 1, 2, 3, 4 months sober, or even a year sober, was like, wake up and you have this chance. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to show up in your life to be bigger? What are you called here on this planet to do and be? Those are the deeper questions that I wish that somebody would have asked me, because maybe it would have called me to be something greater. I floundered with other addictions while I was clean and sober. I haven't had a drink or a drug in 18 years, but I was in other addictions that are called like process addictions, which was, being addicted to relationships, to men, to sex, to sugar was a big one. After I quit smoking, I used to smoke. And once I quit smoking, overeating, sugar addiction. So I had these other, arms of addiction come and they prevented me from having a life that that could have been even better than it was. But anything was an improvement over my past as an addict. And so I get to give myself a break for that. And I have compassion for myself looking back. I was just a kid. I was clean and sober. And okay, so I was in relationship after relationship, or I, ate a bunch of sugar and gained a lot of weight. Like, at least I didn't pick up alcohol or drugs. And for me, as long as I don't do that, everything else is just a bonus. My life is just a bonus. Anything on top of being clean and sober. So, I mean, yeah, I did other things that were unhealthy, but to have the baseline of sobriety was just the most important thing. But I would like to just, you know, ask you guys to think about, you know, with this choice and this chance that you have, and go beyond like the bullshit that your mind wants to think. Like, you know, we all have an ego. We all have a smaller self. We all have those voices in our head that are never say anything positive, right? That just want to tear us down and want to say we can't do it, or why bother, or this is stupid, or, you know. But if you can get below that into a deeper level, into your heart, there's a voice there, and that's real, and it never goes away, no matter what we do. You know, it's always there, and that's the voice of our spirit and our soul, and it speaks to us if we just become still enough and learn to listen. And that voice, you know, it loves you, and it wants you to be your best self. You know, everyone on the planet, and no one is excluded, has, you know, a potential to be great, to create amazing things in their lives, and it doesn't matter what happened in the past. I mean, I didn't even tell you half my story. I know there's a, you know, one or two of you that heard it before, and if you want to share some of the nitty gritty, like crazy ass details, you can. But I did horrible things that I thought I would never get over. I thought I would, you know, regret this stuff for the rest of my life. And I mean, I do regret it, but no one is excluded from miracles. No one is excluded from forgiveness. No one is excluded from having a chance at a better life. And it's your choice. It doesn't matter what is going on in your life outside, you know, or the wreckage you've created in the past. It doesn't matter, you know, what you've done. There's nothing that can prevent you from creating greatness in your life. And you know, it's what you do every single day. And for me, it was more learning to like be kinder to myself. I didn't understand how to do that, but to give myself a break, to let myself off the hook. I mean, not enough to go, you know, do pick up or do stupid things, but like, I'm a human being. Like, I deserve love and compassion. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm doing the best I can. And from that space, you know, we bring this level of love and forgiveness to ourselves that will help us to, you know, extend that to other people, and it will change your relationships with others. It'll change your relationship with yourself. And from that space, you can create, you know, this, you can make better decisions that will help you create a better life. And, you know, that you guys and nobody are excluded from having a great life. You're just not. I mean, my life is so fucking amazing. Like, I love my life. I never thought I would say that. I never thought I would say that I love myself. I love my life. My life is an amazing adventure. I travel all over the world. I have freedom. I have a relationship. I have abundance. I have money. I have, like, the world is a kind and loving place to me now. Before, I thought it was harsh and unyielding and hard, but it was because it was the way my energy was. I now come from a place of love and compassion, and I empower myself to create my own life. And the world is just lovely. It's lovely. It's all in my perception. You know, I see strangers on the street. Everyone smiles at me and I smile at them. And there's just this connection, you know. I mean, being in early sobriety, that wasn't as apparent to me, but I'm just giving you that example because it is possible, no matter where you've come from or what you've done, to create a new life for yourself. And so I just want to encourage you, you know, like this weekend, it's Easter weekend, and even if you're not religious, like, it's still a symbol of significance, especially for an addict, because it's kind of like the phoenix, you know, like what our agency, Phoenix Counseling, is named after, the story of the phoenix bird rising from the ashes. You know, Easter is a sign of rising and redemption and rebirth and salvation and new life. So, you know, I just invite you guys to think this weekend you have this chance to create a new life. And so what would that look like for you? So that's all I've got to say. And does anybody have anything